Hey guys, it's Emma, welcome back, and today we are talking about college. Surprise, surprise! But specifically college out of state. I have a lot of students asking me how to get into colleges out of state, what that looks like, how to realistically make that happen, so I thought I'd make a video about it. Let's go! This video is going to be a lot about affordability. That's one of the biggest concerns my students have is like, how do I go out of state and afford it? Which is so valid. College can be quite expensive and moving to another state can also be pretty expensive. But I'm here to tell you that it can be done and hopefully put you on the right track to figuring out how. This video is going to be pretty general because every college is different, every state is different. I have no idea where you guys are applying, but I'm gonna do my best to at least get you started with where to look at like different things. Okay, so first a little term distinction. So there's two different types of universities and colleges. There's public and there's private. This is pretty self-explanatory, but public is going to be run by the government, and they're usually gonna be bigger schools. So in Arizona, that's like ASU, NAU, U of A. In California, it would be like the UC schools, so like UC Berkeley, UCLA, there's obviously so many others, but those are just some examples. And then private universities are gonna be privately run and charged like very different prices from one another. I would say typically public universities are all pretty consistent like across the state. Private universities, it really depends. They can pretty much set their prices to be whatever they want, and their scholarships as well. Some examples of private universities, you have GCU and like Arizona Christian in Arizona. In California, you have like Stanford and like Berkeley School of Music. Yeah, you get the gist. There are so many, but yeah, it's a kind of important distinction to make before we get into the content. Okay, so regarding public universities, there is a pretty big difference between pricing for in-state versus out-of-state students, and also scholarship opportunities. In-state will usually get a lot lower tuition prices and sometimes higher scholarship amounts. So it's like if you're an Arizona resident for, I don't know, 5 years, something like that, 2 years, it depends on the state, you qualify for in-state tuition prices. But if I, as an Arizona resident, were to go to California, I would be considered an out-of-state student, obviously. And so the pricing is pretty different. This is just something to keep in mind. To kind of combat this a little bit, there is a partnership between a lot of the public universities on the west coast of the US. It's called WUI, which stands for Western Undergraduate Exchange, and it's basically like a different tuition price and scholarship amounts that are somewhere in between in-state and out-of-state. I will link that down below. Feel free to check that out. Pretty much every college and university will have their pricing for in-state versus out-of-state on their website. So that's just helpful to look at and get a baseline. Some of those numbers are pretty shocking. Don't freak out. There are scholarships, there is financial aid, don't worry. It's just something to be aware of. Okay, now on to the question everyone wants the answer to. How do I get scholarships? So there's a lot of ways to get scholarships. One of the main ones is through the college or university you're applying for. So it'll have different scholarship amounts and applications on their websites usually. Some of them will be based on your GPA, your high school activities. Some of them will be based on financial need. Some of them will be a combination of both. Again, it really depends on the university. For public universities, there will probably be differences in scholarship amounts between in-state, out-of-state, and WUI students. For private universities, that's usually not the case, since they're not funded by the government. It's kind of the same scholarships for all their students. Don't quote me on that though. There's a whole bunch of universities. I don't know the specifics of every single one of them. Beyond that, there's a lot of external scholarship websites. There's the bigger scholarship organizations you may have heard of, like bold.org, FastWeb, Going Merry. I'm blanking on them right now, but I will link them in the video. And then there's also local organizations for your area, or maybe the area that the school you're applying for is in. Stuff like Rotary clubs, Lions clubs, Elk Society. I promise there's more organizations that aren't just animal names, but I'll also put up some of the more common ones. Those you will have to check and make sure that you meet the requirements for where you're planning to go to university. A lot of times they're going to be specific to if you're staying in your state. So if you're wanting to go out of state, sometimes that might be an issue. Just something to keep in mind. Beyond that, there's also FAFSA, which is a free application for federal student aid, which is money from the government for school. I will make a full separate video on that if there aren't already videos on our YouTube about that. That's a whole different thing, but that will apply no matter where you go to school. Your FAFSA amount should be relatively consistent across different states. Okay, I know I've been talking for a while. I will just leave you with a couple things to consider while you're thinking about applying for colleges out of state. The first is going to be what sort of vibe you want to have for college. Do you want to live in a big city? Do you want to live in a more rural area? Do you like the beach? Do you like the mountains? I think location is important because it will influence sort of the vibe of the school and your experience there. Another thing is, do you want to go to a larger school or do you want to go to a smaller school? Really, really big schools like 80,000, 100,000 undergraduates, think like Texas A&M. There's going to be loads of opportunities, different sports clubs, activities, tons of people, high school spirit, but also really large classes, maybe less connection with your professors just because there's so many students. Or smaller schools, there's usually less sports and activities, but maybe smaller class sizes, more personal connections with your professors, with your classmates. Again, it really depends on like you as a person as well. And then also just considering like, are you okay with being away from your family? Could be a couple hours drive, could be a couple hours flight, but that is something that's gonna be pretty different for most of you guys, like living away from your family, your parents, your siblings. I don't say any of this to discourage you, just things to consider, because you are kind of picking what your life's gonna look like for the next couple of years, which is really exciting, and I think you guys are gonna do so great. As always, we're always here to help you. Feel free to set up an advising appointment with one of the NACRC or SYS advisors at your school. Reach out to us if you have any questions, and that's all I have for you in this video. Bye guys!